Hello and welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're going to be creating basic blocks and items as well as a creative tab and looking at tags and JSONs. Let's start by finishing up our main class so that we can start work on our blocks and items. So the first thing we're going to do is make a variable for the mod ID so that we can access that from anywhere. So let's create a public, so it can be accessed from anywhere, static, final, string, mod ID, and this is going to be equal to tutorial mod. And this has to be the same thing that you set up here. So now whenever we want our mod ID, we can just get it from the main class. Next, I just want to quickly make a creative tab to put all of my stuff in. So let's create a public static final creative mode tab, and this is going to be called tutorial tab. And let's set this equal to a new creative mode tab. And you can see this is going to give us an error, so let's hover over this and add a string argument. And this is going to be our creative tab ID. I'm just going to put mod ID because I'm only going to have one creative tab, but you want this to be different every time you make a creative tab. For the icon, we're going to have to create an item first, but I'm going to put @only_in, open this and write dist.client. If you have an import error, you can now press Ctrl-Shift-O to import everything. If you want to create another creative tab, you can just copy and paste this down here, change this name to like tutorial blocks or something, and then you're going to want to add something to the ID because you don't want these two IDs to be the same. But I'm going to delete that, and now we can start work on our items. So in our com.cy4.tutorial mod, we're going to right click on that, go to new, and click package. And I'm going to write dot and then init and press finish. And this is going to create a new init package. Now let's right click on that and create a new class called ItemInit. And in here we're going to create all the items for our mod. So next we're going to need to create something called a deferred register. And this is a register that just holds all of the items that we have in our mod. And this is once again going to be public, static, and final. So we need a deferred register, and you can press Ctrl space to bring up the search window. And if you press enter, you'll see that it defaults to something like this. We can replace this with item, because we're going to be registering items. Let's name the register items, and let's set it equal to deferred register, and then we can delete all of this stuff, dot create, and then we want to select the second one over here. And the first thing this is going to take is forge registries dot items, so we know that it's an item registry. And the next thing is going to be the mod ID variable that we set before. So let's do tutorial mod, which is the main class, dot mod ID. And you can see that this isn't imported, so we can press Ctrl-Shift-O to import item, and then select net.minecraft world item. And there we go. Next, let's create a function which will register our item. So this is going to be private because we only need this in this class, and it's going to be static. And we're going to say that the T has to extend item, and then we can press Ctrl space and type registry object of T. So what's happening here is that this method will have to return a registry object of something that extends item. And now we can type register, and in here we're going to pass in a final string name, which is going to be the name of the item, and a final supplier of T called item. And all we have to do in here is return items.register, name, and item. So now we can make our example item. Let's create a public static final registry object of item, and this is going to be called an example item. And let's set this to register the name for our item. So this is going to be lowercase, and we're not going to have spaces, we're just going to have tabs. Let's add a semicolon here, and then we need a supplier for our item. And to make a supplier, we can add brackets and then an arrow. And then here we want to create a new item. And this needs properties, so we can hover over this and add our property. To do that, let's create a new item.properties, and this is going to be the properties for our item. So after this, we can add a dot and then add different properties. So we can say no repair, we can give it a rarity, we can make it fire resistance, we can add durability, but the thing I'm going to do is do tab to add it to a creative tab. And then I'm going to select tutorial mod tutorial tab, which is the tab that we created before. So next in our tutorial mod, I'm going to create an icon. So I'm going to return a new item stack of ItemInit.exampleItem.get. So now the icon for our creative tab is going to be the item. And what we're doing here is we're getting the item, which is a registry object of item, and then we can get .get, which is actually returning the item variable. And then we're creating a new item stack and passing it into the tab. Next, we need to register our ItemInit, and for that we're going to need the mod event bus. To do that, let's create an iEvent bus called bus, and this is going to be equal to fml java mod loading context, and you can press Ctrl space, .get mod event bus. Then we can do ItemInit.items, so the deferred register, and then we can register that to the bus. And there we go. Now all our items will load into the game. Next, we need to create textures and models for that item. So in our source main resources, let's create a new package called assets, and then your mod ID, so tutorial mod. And in a couple of episodes, I'll show you how to automate all these JSONs, but for now we're going to create them manually. So in here, let's create a new package called .lang, another new package called .models.item, another new package called .models.block, then another new package called .textures.item, and a package called .textures.block. And finally, we're going to add one more package called .blockstates. There we go. So let's start off with the lang. In here, let's create a new file called en_us.json. And this is the file which is going to give our item its name. So let's open brackets like this, press tab, and in here we're going to do item.tutorialMod, so our mod ID, .exampleItem, and this example item is the same as the one we put in the register function, colon, then more of these, and then the name of our item. So it's going to be example item. And that's it for our lang file. Next, let's create the item model. So under the models item, let's create a new file. And this is going to be called example_item. So it has to have that same name that we used in the register, .json. And then we're going to once again open these. And here we're going to set a parent. And this is the parent item model. And this is just going to be item/generated, which is the standard item model. Next, we need to give it a texture to use. So let's create a new thing called textures and open brackets once again. And we need a layer 0, which is the main texture. And then we need to pass in a path for that texture. And this is going to be tutorial mod :item/example item. And this is just going to pick the example item texture that's going to be located in textures.item over here. So now we just need to add that item texture. So here I've created our example item texture, and this is a PNG file, and it is 16 by 16, which is the standard dimension in Minecraft. You can make 32 by 32, but that is wrong, and I'm not doing that. So I'm just going to drag this file into our textures.item folder, and click OK. And there we go. So now if we run the game, and you can see that we have another creative tab that isn't actually named, so we need to fix that, but we have our example item. Now let's fix the creative tab and start work on the block. So to fix that, we're going to add a comma here and create a new thing called itemGroup.tutorial mod, which is the ID that we set in our creative mode tab. And we're going to set this equal to tutorial mod tab. And that is it. Now let's start work on the block. In our init package, let's create a new class called BlockInit. And we're going to go to our ItemInit and we're going to copy the deferred register. And let's change the item to block, the items to blocks, and the items over here to blocks. Then we can press Ctrl-Shift-O to import net.minecraft.world.level.block.block. Next, I want to get the deferred register of the items as well. So let's copy-paste this start bit, change the block to items, change this to items, and set it equal to ItemInit.item. Press Ctrl-Shift-O and import item. And this is going to let us register both blocks and items for our blocks in one class. Next, let's create a couple of functions. Let's go to our ItemInit and copy paste this over here. And we're going to change this item to a block and change this to blocks as well. And we're going to call this register block. Then we're going to copy this and put it below. And we're going to change the register block to just register. And we're going to change a couple of things up. We need to change this in our register block to something that extends T. And we need to rename this to block, like so. Then in here we need the exact same thing with block. And this is going to be a function of registry object of T. And, so we need to put a comma here, supplier of something that extends item. And this is going to be our item. Let's press Ctrl-Shift-O to import java.util.function.function. Then we can remove this and we can say a registry object of T, which is our object, is going to be equal to register block of the name and the block. Then we do items.register the name and item.apply the block. And then we're going to return obj. And what this is going to do is register our block with the name and the block, and register an item based on the block that is given. Now we can create a block. So let's create a public static final registry object of block, and this is going to be our example block is equal to, so we can either call register block if we don't want to have an item associated with it, or register if we do. So I want an item, so I'm going to use register. And this is going to need the name once again, so example block. Then we need a supplier for the block, so let's create a new block, like so. And then we need to add an argument for the properties. And inside the block, we're going to create a block behavior dot properties dot of, and then we pass in a material, so I'm going to use material.metal because I'm going to have a metal block, and a material color. This is the color that will show up on the map. So I'm going to set this to purple. And that's actually it. Now we need a function for the item. So as you can see over here, this function first takes a registry object for the block. So let's call this object. And we're going to create a function like so. And this function is going to create a new item for that block. And in here we're going to pass in new item.properties like we did before. And then this is the same thing as before. So I'm going to set a tab for tutorial mod.tutorial tab. But this actually has to be a supplier, so we need to add another one of these. So now what we're doing is creating a block with this name. Then we're giving it a block with a material of metal and a purple color on the map. And then we're saying that we're going to create a new item over here, which is going to be in our tutorial tab. Now we need to register our BlockInit, and we want to make sure to do this after the items. So let's go to tutorial mod, and under here, all we have to do is add BlockInit.blocks.register bus, like so. Then we can save that and start making the JSONs. And the block is going to have a couple more JSONs than before. So let's create our block state. In our block states package, let's create a new file. This is going to be called example block, so the name we set before, .json. Let's open some brackets. And what the block state does is it chooses between different models based on the state of the block. So let's create a new thing called variants, which is going to be a list of all the possible models. So in our variants, we can do any block state. So this is for any different state of the block. We're going to use the same model, and that model is going to be tutorial mod :block/example block, which is going to reference a model in our models.block package. Now let's create our models.block. So in models.block, let's create a new file, and this is going to be called example block.json, and this is our block model. So once again, let's open brackets. And there's a lot of different things you can do. I recommend checking the Minecraft wiki. But we're going to give this a parent, which is going to be block/cube_all, which means all the textures are going to be the same on every side of the cube. Next, let's add the textures, just like we did in our item model. And instead of using a layered 0, here we're going to have all. So all of the sides are going to have the texture, tutorial mod, block / example block, which is now going to reference the texture in our textures.block package. And before we put the texture in, let's now edit our en.us.json, and in here we're going to use block.tutorialMod.example block is going to have the name example block. And there we go, I've created our example block texture, which is also 16 by 16, and you can see it over here. So let's drag that into our textures.block, and there we go. However, before I can do that, I need to add a couple more stuff to the block. So in our source main resources, we're going to create a new package, and this is going to be data.tutorialMod. So here we have our texture pack, and also we have over here a data pack. In here, let's create a new package called loot_tables.blocks, and this has to be plural. And in here, let's create a new file called example_block.json. And we want to just make sure that it drops the default block when it's mined. So let's create a type, and this is going to be of type Minecraft::block. And then we're going to have pools, and this is going to be a list. So we use square brackets, and then we're going to have one singular pool. So let's just open more brackets. And this pool is only going to have one role. So let's do roles:1.0, comma, and then we need the entries for this role. So let's add another list. And in here we only have one singular entry, and this is going to be a type of Minecraft::item. So we're going to drop an item with the name of tutorial mod : example block. So we would just want to drop our example block when it is mined. And there we go, that's our loot table. Back in our BlockInit, let's give it a strength. So after we set the color dot to purple, we can add a dot, and then we can give it a bunch of different stuff. We can make it emit light, we can make it have no collision, etc. I'll cover this in detail in the next episodes, but we're going to do dot strength, and this is going to be its blast resistance and how difficult it is to mine. I'm going to set this to 3.0f, but you can play around with this number if you'd like to. Let's also give this a sound type, so let's do sound type dot metal. And this is just some basic stuff that we can do. Once again, I'll be covering more of this in the next episode. Once again, in our data package, let's create a new package, and then we're going to delete everything up until data. And here we're going to do data.minecraft, because what we want to do is edit the tags for which blocks are mineable with an axe and which are mineable with a pickaxe. So let's do data.minecraft.tags.blocks and press enter. In here, let's create a new package called .mineable. And in here, we're going to create a new file called pickaxe.json. And you can change this to hoe, axe, or shovel, but I'm just going to leave this as pickaxe. And we want to set replace to false because we want to keep all the vanilla stuff that's in the game already. Then let's add our values, and this is going to be a list. So let's put in some values. I'm going to add our tutorial mod example block. And if you want to add more values, you can just add a comma and add more lines like so. But I only have one block, so I'm just going to leave this for now. So now our block is only mineable with a pickaxe. And you can do the exact same thing for different tools, you just have to rename the file over here. And we made a small mistake in the BlockInit class. This item actually needs to be a block item. So let's press Ctrl+Shift+O to import that. And before the item.properties, we need to add the block, which is going to be object.get, like so. And finally, we need to create an item model for our block as well, so that it knows how to render in the inventory. So let's create a new file called example_block.json. And this is going to be a bit shorter than the item model for an item, because all it's going to have is the parent for our block model. So our parent is tutorial mod : block/example block. So that's just going to set our item model to be the same as our block model. And in our BlockInit, I'm going to add .requires correct tool for drops. And then to set the mining level in our data, we're going to create a new file. And we're going to click on blocks and call this needs iron tool.json. And you can set this to whatever you want, so needs diamond tool or needs stone tool. But I'm just going to copy everything from our pickaxe.json and paste it in here. And that is it. Now we can run the game, and in the game we can see that we have our example block, and you can mine it with a pickaxe, but if you mine it with an axe, it won't actually drop, and the same goes for stone tools. There you go. That's going to do it for this video. If you need any help, join the Discord. The link is in the description, along with the source code and textures used in this video. In the next episode, we're going to cover advanced blocks and items, so that's custom classes for the blocks and the items, as well as block properties and block states. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.